Good morning, Ole Hansen, commodity specialist at Saxo Bank. Can you say your predictions for the biggest commodity markets?
Well, the commodity markets right now is going through a major correction. Market is worried about the economic outlook with the very tightening of interest rates we're seeing, especially led by the US. We have a massively stronger dollar, which is also negatively impacting markets. And we've had the prolonged lockdowns in China, which is obviously one of the world's biggest consumers of commodities. So these three major drivers, on top of the war in Ukraine and the sanctions against Russia, has really created a very uncertain market. But in the short term, we're going to see some further weakness because of the recession risks. But once that starts to settle down, we will once again focus on some of these markets where supply is relatively tight. We obviously know the situation in the gas market, especially here in Europe, where supplies will be tight. I think we will get through the winter without a problem because we've seen a lot of arrivals of LNG. I believe crude oil is also going to recover at some point because of the lack of investment that has gone into the market for a number of years, and that's really going to keep this market quite tight. Also, we could see OPEC step in, cutting production basically to support the price. So these are markets that are already looking for coming higher at some point. If we look at one sector and that's probably the most concerning, I would say, from a global security perspective, is basically the food commodities. We've seen food commodities not correct to the same extent or sell-off as we've seen in metals and in energy, and that is really due to the kind of weather we've seen around the world. We have a La Niña formation once again forming in the Pacific, which for the third time in a row could create some trouble for farmers around the world, especially on the southern hemisphere. So we see many of these key food commodities, the outlook for those remaining tight, and that will keep prices supported into the winter and into next spring.
So, do you think that the prices for petrol and diesel will keep on rising then?
I think we will stabilize. We're coming down right now, and obviously that's good news from an inflation perspective because we're seeing interest rates around the world being hiked very aggressively in order to bring inflation under control. And as some of these key input prices start to come down, that will also have a positive impact on the outlook for inflation, i.e. that the inflation is coming down. But again, unless we run into a very deep recession, I think the outlook for demand for gasoline and diesel remains quite strong. We also have the embargo on Russian oil and fuel products starting in December through to February next year, where diesel and gasoline will be impacted. Then that will still create a tight market situation, which probably will mean that the price drops we've seen during the past 3 or 4 months will come to an end, and into 2023 we will see higher prices, not back to the record levels we saw last year, but at least higher than where we are right now.
So do you think that if the Fed didn't raise the rates, the inflation would keep on rising still?
They would because the market is we need to. The only way the central bank can really control inflation is not through. They cannot print more or produce more commodities to bring prices down or input costs. So the only thing they can do is really just to kill the economic activity by making it more expensive, and that's what interest rate hikes are doing. And it's coming at the same time where we in Europe has an energy crisis, which is just making it even worse. So the economic slowdown is coming. And that obviously will mean that you and me as a consumer, we will consume less, and that will help bring prices under control. And obviously you can almost argue that the sooner it happens, so the harder the central banks step on the brakes, the sooner we can also see the market start to recover, because then it will start to focus on how to support the economics outlook, which obviously right now will be challenged. But in the short term, the central banks around the world, especially led by the FOMC in the US or the Federal Reserve, they are focusing on bringing inflation down, and if the recession is the price, then they're prepared to pay that price right now. So hopefully the very sharp medicine we're seeing right now with dramatically rising rates will mean that we will start to see a recovery sometime next year.
So sometime next year, okay, that sounds positive. Are there any commodities that you think are very overpriced and underpriced?
Well, I like to say see something like gold being underpriced, because gold is down 20% this year in dollar terms, and that is obviously that's down from the peak. It's only down around 10%, and you have to remember this is the year where we've seen the biggest rally in the dollar for many years, probably almost in as far as back as I can remember, and I got grey hair so I can remember far back, and we also seen a massive jump in interest rates, and these two are really major headwinds for the price of gold. But I think we have to consider whether the long-term inflation forecast that we're seeing right now, basically getting inflation back down below 3% or even lower, whether that can be achieved. If not, then gold will still act as a hedge against the prospect of longer-term inflation, because while we believe that inflation will come down from current levels, I think the long-term outlook for inflation remains higher than what we have been used to for the past 10 years, simply because the world is changing. We're seeing a deglobalization. We're seeing supply chains being disrupted. We're seeing maybe production being taken back from Asia. We're seeing the problems with Russia and so on. And that basically means that all of these developments and just the energy security in Europe, we have to get used to higher price for energy, because Russian gas is not going to be flowing in the years to come. That just makes the economic activity more expensive. So inflation will end up at a lower level than now, but at a higher level than I believe the market is pricing in. And that's why we still believe that gold could be a good part of your portfolio. In terms of overpriced, I don't really see much of that anymore, because we've seen these dramatic corrections from the highs, anywhere between 8% and almost up to 70% if you look at something like nickel. So the prices has adjusted quite substantially, and you can argue that prices are increasingly pricing in a recession. And if the recession ends up being weaker and not as aggressive as the market worries about, then obviously some of these prices are too cheap relatively to supply and demand. So actually I see more prices being undervalued than overpriced right now.
And how could investors profit from opportunities in the commodity market?
We generally tend to look at broad investments, because commodities are notoriously volatile. You can have big, sharp movements within the individual commodities. So that's why we, over longer horizon, we look at commodities as a necessity. We look at the green transformation, which is going to require a lot of different metals. We look at the global food situation. We look at the energy situation, where lack of investments going into finding oil for tomorrow and the next year and the year after is likely to keep prices elevated for the foreseeable future. So we look at ETFs basically covering the whole commodity space. And if we look at individual sectors, I like the metal space. Metals has been hit hard because of the slowdown in China, but we also have to remember that if we are serious about the green transformation, we are looking at increased demand for many key metals over the coming years, and that will underpin the price at a time where mining companies may struggle to find the additional supply. So I like the metal space, but overall, if you are looking at the long-term prospects, I believe an investment in commodity as a whole, as a basket, where you basically you buy an ETF that tracks an index of a basket of major commodities. That will be the way I'll proceed.
Okay. Last question. Of course, because of the problem with Russia, people looking for alternative energies, like going back to nuclear energy again. Could it mean a big raise in demand for, for example, uranium?
Uranium has been very volatile this year, because it is, as you say, a very much hot topic. It is a theme that many investors have been looking into. We've seen many new funds basically being invested in uranium and uranium mining companies. I think it's a long-term trade. Don't expect big moves in the short term in uranium, because it's relatively easy to predict the demand going forward, because you don't build a nuclear plant overnight. You know more or less what the demand is going to be in the years to come. But I strongly believe that nuclear will be part of the energy solution going forward, because it is a very high. It provides a very high base load that we normally have been using coal for, and obviously we need to get rid of coal over the coming years. So the nuclear sector, uranium mining companies, nuclear manufacturing companies, I think that it will still be a theme that will be interesting to follow over the coming years.
Okay, Ole Hansen, thanks for the interview.
Thank you.